The signal came out of the dark like a scream. It hit the sensors of the Iron Dawn at 0300 ship time, when most of the crew was asleep, and the bridge ran on a skeleton watch. The night officer, a young woman named Lieutenant Mira Voss, almost missed it. She was tired, and the display was full of the usual static that space always carried. But the pattern was wrong. It repeated, it had structure. It was not noise, it was a call for help. Mira sat up straight, and ran the signal through the translation core. The computer chewed on it for 11 seconds, which felt like an hour, and then gave her words in flat machine English. Repeating distress call. Origin. Unknown species. Message. We are dying. Please. Anyone. Help us. We have children here. Mira's hands went cold. She had heard training recordings of distress calls before, but never a real one. Never words like that. She hit the comm button. Captain to the bridge, we have a priority 1 signal. Captain Elias Reyes arrived within 3 minutes, still buttoning his jacket, his hair messy from sleep. He was not a large man, and he did not look like the heroes in old war movies. He was plain-faced, with tired eyes and a quiet voice. But when he sat in the captain's chair, the whole bridge seemed to settle, like a ship finding its balance in rough water. Play it, he said. The message played again. The alien voice under the translation was strange, full of clicks and low tones, but the fear in it came through anyway. Fear did not need translation. Where is it coming from? Reyes asked. Bearing 317, distance 6 light hours, said the navigator, a broad-shouldered man named Chief Petty Officer Dario Cole. That puts it near a system we don't have on any human charts. Unexplored space. Could be Concord territory. Could be Scarn territory. We don't know who owns that patch of stars. The Concord was the loose group of alien civilizations that had first met humanity 9 years ago. The Scarn Dominion was the empire that had been fighting the Concord for longer than humans had existed as a spacefaring people. Humanity was new to all of this. Humans had only been out among the stars for a decade, and most of the galaxy still saw them as a small, strange, unimportant species. A curiosity, not a threat, and not a help either. Sir, said Mira, the signal is getting weaker. Whatever ship is sending it, it's taking damage. If we're going to help, we can't wait for orders from Fleet Command. By the time a message reaches Earth and comes back, it'll be over. Reyes rubbed his jaw. This was the moment every captain dreaded and hoped for at the same time. The moment when the rulebook had nothing useful to say, and a decision had to be made with only your own judgment to guide you. The Iron Dawn was not a big ship. It was a scout-class warship, built for speed and stealth, not for major battles. It carried a crew of 42. Its job was to patrol the edges of human space, watch for danger, and report back. It was not built to fight fleets. It was built to run from them. Command doctrine says we hold position and report, said the first officer, Commander Anna Petrova, a sharp-eyed woman with a scar over one eyebrow from a training accident years ago. We don't have authorization to enter unclaimed space, and we definitely don't have authorization to get involved in someone else's war. I know what the doctrine says, Reyes said quietly. Then you know we could lose the ship, we could lose everyone on it. For people we've never met, who might not even be grateful, who might see us as trespassers instead of rescuers. I know that too. He looked at the screen, at the flickering red line that marked the distress signal, weaker now than it had been 2 minutes ago. Somewhere out there, in the dark, someone had said, "We have children here," and meant it. "Chief Cole," Reyes said, "plot a course. Best speed." Cole didn't hesitate, though his jaw tightened. "Aye, sir." Petrova stood very still for a second, and then nodded, because that was what a good first officer did once the captain made the call. She would argue before the decision. She would not argue after. "All hands, battle stations," she said into the ship-wide comm. "This is not a drill." The Iron Dawn moved through the dark at a speed that would have been impossible only 50 years earlier. Human engines were not the best in the galaxy. The Concord species had faster ships, better shields, sharper weapons. But humans had one strange gift that other species often underestimated. They were very, very good at making do with less, and they were even better at refusing to give up. It took the ship 40 minutes to cross the distance. 40 minutes in which the crew prepared for a fight they knew almost nothing about. They did not know how many enemy ships were out there. They did not know what weapons those ships carried. They did not know if the aliens sending the distress call would welcome human help or fear it. Ensign Priya Sharma, the ship's weapons officer, ran diagnostics on every gun 3 times over. She was the youngest officer on the bridge, only 24, and this was her first real crisis since joining the crew. Her hands shook slightly as she worked, but her voice stayed steady when she spoke. Main cannons at 100%, Captain. Point defense grid online. Missile bays loaded. Good, Reyes said. Keep them that way. The ship's doctor, a calm older man named Dr. Samuel Okafor, moved through the medical bay preparing for casualties. He had served on 3 ships before this one, and he had seen what battle could do to a body. He hoped tonight would not be like those other nights. He suspected it might be worse. When the Iron Dawn finally dropped out of its fast travel state and returned to normal space, the bridge crew saw the scene all at once, and for a moment, nobody spoke. Ahead of them, against the black of space, a battle was already ending, and losing badly for one side. A large alien vessel, easily 5 times the size of the Iron Dawn, drifted with its hull torn open in 3 places. Fires burned in the vacuum, fed by escaping gas, casting orange light across broken metal. Smaller shapes moved around it like wolves circling wounded prey. 6 sleek black warships, marked with a symbol none of the humans recognized, a jagged red claw on a dark field. That's not Concord design, Petrova said, studying the enemy ships. And it's not Skarn's standard configuration either. New player, or a faction we haven't cataloged. Doesn't matter who they are, Reyes said. They're killing people who asked for help. That's enough. On the sensor display, faint life signs blinked on the crippled alien ship. Fewer of them than there should have been. Some of the signs were very small. Children, Reyes thought, or the alien equivalent of children. He remembered the words from the distress call. We have children here. Priya, Reyes said. Target the 2 nearest enemy ships. Full spread, main cannons. Aye, sir. Target locked. Fire when ready. The Iron Dawn opened fire. Space lit up white and gold as the ship's main cannons sent long streaks of plasma across the black distance. The nearest enemy ship, caught by surprise, took the first hit directly on its side and staggered, venting atmosphere from a fresh wound. The second hit followed within seconds, and the enemy ship broke into 2 pieces, spinning apart in silence. For 3 full seconds, nothing else happened. The remaining 5 enemy ships seemed frozen, as if they could not believe a small, unfamiliar vessel had just destroyed one of their own in a single pass. Then they turned, all 5 at once, toward the Iron Dawn. Well, Petrova said grimly, we have their attention now. Evasive pattern Delta, Reyes ordered. Priya, keep firing. Cole, keep us moving. Don't let them get a clean shot. The ship rocked as enemy weapons found their mark. Not a direct hit, but close enough to rattle the hull and throw sparks from a damaged console near the back of the bridge. A junior technician cried out and was pulled clear by a crewmate before the sparks could catch his uniform. Shields down to 82%, called out the engineering officer over the comm, a wiry man named Yusuf Demir, who had been with the ship since its first launch. We can take a few more hits like that, Captain, but not many. Understood. Reyes kept his eyes on the tactical display, watching the enemy ships spread out, trying to surround the Iron Dawn, the way they must have surrounded the alien vessel before humans arrived. It was smart tactics. It would have worked against a slower, less clever crew. But Dario Cole had spent 6 years flying scout ships through asteroid fields and gravity storms, and he knew how to make a small ship dance. He rolled the Iron Dawn hard to port, then cut thrust and fired reverse jets, sliding sideways in a move that should not have been possible for a ship this size. 2 enemy shots meant for the hull sailed through empty space instead. Nice flying, Petrova muttered. Thank you, ma'am. Priya's cannons found their second target, then a third, precise fire punching through weakened enemy shields. The unknown black ships were fast, but their shields were not as strong as human sensors had first estimated, and their pilots did not expect this kind of maneuvering from what they likely assumed was a weaker species. Still, 5 against 1, now 4 against 1, was a hard fight, and everyone on the bridge knew it. The Iron Dawn took another glancing hit, then a direct one that threw the whole crew sideways in their harnesses, and filled the bridge with the smell of burning wire. "Shields at 60%, Demir reported, tension sharp in his voice now. "Hull breach on deck 3. Automatic seals engaged. No casualties reported yet." "Yet," Petrova repeated under her breath. Reyes felt the weight of every choice pressing on his chest. He had brought his crew into a fight they had never trained for, against an enemy they did not understand, to save strangers who might not even survive long enough to be grateful. If he was wrong, 42 people would die out here in the dark, and nobody back home would even know why for weeks. But then he looked at the crippled alien ship again, at the flickering distress beacon, still broadcasting its old message even now, even as its people burned. "We have children here." "Hold the line," he said quietly. "We're not leaving them." The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was, in truth, only 11 minutes. The Iron Dawn dodged and struck, using every trick its crew had ever learned, every scrap of the small advantage human ships carried in maneuverability. 2 more enemy ships fell, one torn apart by a lucky shot to its reactor core, the other crippled and drifting after Priya put 3 missiles through its engine section. Only 2 enemy ships remained, and they seemed to realize, perhaps for the first time, that this fight was no longer easy prey. They broke off, turning away from both the Iron Dawn and the wounded alien vessel, and vanished into fast travel a moment later, abandoning the fight rather than risk further losses. Silence fell across the bridge. For a moment nobody moved, as if afraid that speaking might bring the enemy back. Then Petrova let out a breath she had clearly been holding for a long time. "They're gone." "Sensor sweep. Confirm," Reyes said, still cautious. "Confirmed, Captain. No enemy contacts within range." Cheers broke out among the junior crew, quick and relieved, before Petrova's sharp look reminded them there was still work to do. Reyes allowed himself only a short nod before turning his attention back to the wounded alien ship still drifting ahead of them. Fires guttering out now in the vacuum, life signs flickering weakly on the sensor display. "Get medical teams ready," he said. "We're bringing them aboard." Dr. Okafor's voice came over the comm almost immediately. "Already prepping, Captain. Tell me what species we're dealing with, so I know what kind of care to expect to give." "We don't know yet, Doctor," Reyes admitted. "We're about to find out." The Iron Dawn moved carefully alongside the broken alien ship, extending a docking tube through the vacuum to a hull breach where survivors had gathered near what looked like an escape point. Through the ship's external cameras, the bridge crew got their first clear look at the beings they had risked everything to save. They were tall, taller than most humans, with long limbs and pale gray-blue skin that seemed to shimmer faintly under the ship's lights. Their eyes were large and dark, without visible pupils, and their faces held an expression that, even to human eyes, clearly showed exhaustion and fear, giving way slowly to disbelief. At the front of the group stood one of them, older than the others judging by the deep lines across its face, holding a smaller one close against its side, a child, unmistakably, judging by its size and the way it clung to the older one's arm. When the docking tube connected and the airlock cycled open, the older alien stepped forward first, moving carefully, watching the human crew with wary, searching eyes. Reyes met them there personally, unarmed, hands open at his sides, the way he had once seen a diplomat do in an old training video about first contact. He did not know if the gesture meant anything to this species. He hoped it would mean something close enough. "You're safe now," he said, slowly, clearly, though he doubted the words themselves would translate yet. "We're not here to hurt you." The universal translator on his wrist device caught up a few seconds later, converting his words into a series of soft tones and clicks. The old alien's eyes widened slightly at the sound. Then, after a long pause, it spoke back, first in its own language, and then, haltingly, the translator rendered the reply into human words. "You came," the alien said, its voice heavy with something between shock and grief and relief all tangled together. "We called into the dark with no hope, and you came. Why?" Reyes thought about the question for a moment. It was, he realized, the only question that mattered. "Because you asked," he said simply. "And nobody should have to die alone out here, without someone at least trying to help." The old alien said nothing for a long moment, staring at him, at the human crew behind him, at the ship itself, small, plain, nothing like the grand vessels of the Concorde fleets this being had likely encountered before. Then it lowered its head, in what looked, to human eyes, very much like a bow. "Then the stories about your kind are wrong," it said quietly. "Or perhaps they are not wrong about all of you. My name is Thassa Velkorin, elder of the Varandi people. This is my granddaughter, S. We owe you a debt that words cannot repay." Behind Reyes, the crew of the Iron Dawn began the slow, careful work of bringing survivors aboard, counting heads, treating wounds, offering blankets and food, and whatever comfort could be given to beings none of them had ever met before that night. None of them yet understood how large this moment truly was. None of them understood that the message Mira Voss had picked up in the dead of night, the message that almost went unheard, was about to ripple outward across a galaxy at war, and that the name of a small human scout ship called the Iron Dawn was about to become known far beyond the borders of human space. For now, there was only the quiet, exhausted work of saving lives, one survivor at a time, in the wreckage of a battle that had almost ended very differently. Reyes stood at the airlock long after the last survivor had been brought aboard, watching the broken Varandi ship drift silently behind them, and wondered, not for the first time that night, what exactly they had just started. He would not have to wonder for long. The Iron Dawn carried 117 Varandi survivors, pulled from a ship built to hold 1,000. The rest, Thassa Velkorin explained quietly to Captain Reyes, were gone, killed in the first attack, before the distress call had even finished sending. She said this without tears, though her large dark eyes seemed to hold something heavier than tears, something older and more tired. The ship's small medical bay was not built for this many patients. Dr. Okafor and his 2 assistants worked through the night, moving between cots set up in corridors and cargo holds, treating burns and broken bones and injuries from a physiology none of them had ever studied before. The Varandi had 2 hearts, they discovered, one higher and one lower in their chest, which explained why some readings on the medical scanners had made no sense, until Okafor adjusted the settings by hand. "Their biology is strange to us," Okafor told Reyes during a brief pause between patients, "but not so strange we can't help. Give me a day and I'll understand them well enough to keep every one of them alive." "Do it," Reyes said, "whatever you need." By morning, ship time, the Iron Dawn was crowded in a way it had never been crowded before. Varandi children, smaller, quieter versions of their parents, with the same large eyes now wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity, sat wrapped in human blankets in the mess hall, watching human crew members with open fascination. A few of the younger human crew members, off duty and unsure what else to do, had started showing the children small things: a deck of cards, a tablet with simple games, a music player with human songs. It was a strange, quiet kind of peace, after the violence of the night before. Reyes found himself standing in the doorway of the mess hall for a long moment, watching a Varandi child laugh, actually laugh, a soft clicking sound the translator rendered as delighted amusement, at something a young crewman named Ensign Tomasz Blazak had shown her on his tablet. Petrova found him there. "Reports are in," she said. "We took real damage last night. Hull breaches on Deck 3 are sealed but not repaired. Shields are back to 85%, and climbing slowly. We lost 2 missile pods completely. Demir says he can patch us together enough to get home, but we shouldn't expect a fight if we run into more trouble along the way." "Understood." Reyes kept his eyes on the mess hall. "How are our people?" "Tired. Proud, I think, though nobody's said it out loud yet. We did something last night, Captain. Something that matters." "We'll see how it matters," Reyes said. "Elder Corin wants to speak with me. Formally, I think. She's been asking since dawn." "Then you'd better go. She's not the type to be kept waiting, if the way she carries herself is any sign." Reyes found Thassa Velkorin in one of the ship's small conference rooms, sitting very straight, in a human chair that clearly did not fit her frame well, her granddaughter S asleep on a cot nearby, exhausted from the night's terror, finally catching up to her small body. The elder rose when Reyes entered, and though her face was hard to read for human eyes, her voice carried real weight. "Captain Reyes," she said, "I have spent the night thinking of how to properly thank a species I know almost nothing about, for a debt I cannot easily repay. I have decided the only honest thing to do is speak plainly, and hope plainness is something your people respect. It usually is, Reyes said, taking a seat across from her. Then hear me plainly. My people, the Verandi, are a minor member of the Concord. We are farmers and builders and scholars, mostly. We are not warriors. We have never needed to be, because larger, stronger species have always stood between us and danger. She paused. Until 3 years ago, when the Skarn Dominion's border began pushing outward faster than the Concord could hold it back. Our home system was one of many caught in that push. The ships that attacked you last night, Reyes said, were those Skarn? Thassa's expression shifted, something like unease crossing her features even through the strangeness of her alien face. No, that is what troubles me most. The Skarn fly ships, marked with their imperial sun symbol, proud and open about who they are, because they believe fear of their name is itself a weapon. The ships that attacked us bore no such symbol, only the red claw, a mark none of my people have ever seen before, in all our records of this long war. Reyes frowned. A new enemy. Or someone hiding who they are. Perhaps both, Thassa said. There have been whispers among Concord scholars, quiet and mostly dismissed, of a faction operating in the space between empires. Raiders, some call them, though that word feels too small for ships capable of nearly destroying a fully crewed Concord vessel in under 10 minutes. If such a faction exists and grows bolder, it could change the shape of this entire war, striking both Concord and Skarn alike, while both sides remain locked in their old conflict. That's not good news, Reyes said quietly. No, Thassa agreed. But here is the strange part, Captain. The part I have turned over in my mind, all through this long night. If such raiders are growing bold enough to attack Concord ships deep inside contested space, they may soon grow bold enough to test the edges of human territory as well. Your people are new to this galaxy. Untested, in the eyes of many. Some among the Concord believe humans are too weak to matter in this war. Others believe humans are too unpredictable to trust. After last night, I believe neither of those things is fully true. Reyes said nothing, letting her continue. Your ship is small, your weapons are, by Concord standards, unremarkable. And yet, you defeated 4 armed raider vessels with a single scout ship, without hesitation, to save people who were strangers to you, and owed you nothing. That is not a small thing, Captain. That is the kind of story that spreads through a galaxy at war, faster than any official message ever could. We didn't do it to make a point, Reyes said. We did it because you needed help. I know, Thassa said, and for the first time, something like warmth entered her ancient voice. That is exactly why it will matter so much. A species that helps because it calculates advantage is one thing. A species that helps simply because helping is right, even at great risk to itself. That is something the Concord has not seen in a very long time. Not since before the war began, if the old records are to be believed. She reached out one long gray-blue hand, an unfamiliar gesture, and Reyes, guessing at its meaning, extended his own hand to meet it. Her grip was firm, gentle, careful of her own strength. When we return to Concord space, she said, I intend to tell this story exactly as it happened. I make no promises about how the Concord Council will receive it. Some will be moved, some will be suspicious, wondering what humans want in return. But the story will spread regardless, Captain Reyes, and I suspect you and your small, brave ship are about to become far more well-known than you ever intended. The journey back toward the nearest Concord outpost, a modest station called Verena Reach, took 6 days at the Iron Dawn. Reduced speed, its damaged engines unable to push much faster without risking a full failure. Those 6 days were, in their own strange way, some of the most important in the whole voyage, because they were the days when humans and Verandi truly began to know one another. Ensign Priya Sharma, still shaken from her first real combat, found herself teaching a group of Verandi children simple card games in the evenings, the same games her own grandmother had taught her as a child in Mumbai. The children picked up the rules quickly, their large eyes tracking every card with sharp attention, and within 2 days they were beating half the junior crew at their own games, much to everyone's amusement. Dr. Okafor spent long hours with the Verandi's own healer, a quiet, thoughtful being named Doss, comparing notes on medicine and biology, each teaching the other things neither had known before. By the 4th day, they had developed a rough shared vocabulary of medical terms good enough that Okafor believed he could treat a Verandi patient alone if he ever needed to, and Doss claimed the same about human patients. Commander Petrova, more reserved than most of her crew, found her own understanding growing through small, quiet moments, watching Elder Corin sit with her granddaughter each night, singing something in the low, clicking Varandi language that needed no translation to understand as a lullaby, watching the exhausted, grieving survivors slowly begin to laugh again, to hope again, in the safety of a human ship. "They're not so different from us," Petrova said to Reyes one evening, as they watched the mess hall from the doorway, full now of easy conversation between two species that had not known of each other's existence a week earlier. Underneath everything, they love their families, they fear loss, they're grateful for kindness. "Most people are like that, I think," Reyes said. "No matter where they come from, it's the ones who forget that, who stop seeing people as people, that cause all the trouble in the first place." On the fifth day, sensors picked up a distant contact, a single ship, moving fast, on a direct course toward them. The bridge tensed immediately, memories of the battle still fresh enough to sharpen every nerve. "Identify," Reyes ordered. It took several long minutes before Cole's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Concord transponder signal, Captain. Reads as a scout vessel, unarmed, registered to Verena Reach Station." "They must have picked up word already," Thassa said, who had joined the bridge crew at Reyes's invitation, curious and eager to understand the humans' methods as much as they were eager to understand hers. "News like this does not travel slowly, even across the distances between stars." The Concord scout ship hailed them moments later, and the voice that came through, once translated, was clearly nervous, clearly excited, clearly unsure how exactly to address a human warship that had, according to the message it had somehow already received, single-handedly driven off a raider force that had crippled a Concord vessel. "This is Concord scout vessel Farron Light, hailing the human ship. Iron Dawn. We have received word of your actions 3 days past. Verena Reach requests your presence, if you are willing, to speak with Station Command. There are many who wish to meet the humans who did not turn away when the Verandi called for help." Reyes glanced at Petrova, who gave a small shrug, and at Thassa, whose expression he was beginning to read well enough now to recognize quiet satisfaction. "Tell them we'll be there," Reyes said. "Though I should warn them, our ship is a bit worse for wear." "I suspect," Thassa said softly, "once the channel closed, that will only make the story more remarkable to them, Captain, not less." Verena Reach was unlike anything the human crew had seen before. A station built into the hollowed core of a small moon, its interior lit with soft blue-green light, home to nearly 4,000 beings from a dozen different Concord species living and working together in a way that felt, to human eyes used to the newness of their own small colonies, ancient and settled and strange. When the Iron Dawn docked, damaged and travel-worn, word had clearly already spread. A crowd had gathered near the docking bay, not a hostile crowd, but a curious, murmuring one, made up of beings of every shape the humans had encountered in Concord space, and several they had not. Tall Verandi, squat, four-armed Dorux, slender, feathered Ashai. All of them watching, whispering, as the airlock cycled open and Captain Reyes stepped out, flanked by Petrova and Thassa Velkorin herself. A station official approached, an older Doruk with graying fur and formal robes, bowing low in a gesture Reyes had learned, over the past 6 days, was a sign of deep respect among several Concord species. "Captain Reyes," the Doruk said, "I am Station Administrator Velmarsh, on behalf of Verena Reach, and I believe on behalf of a great many in the Concord, who have already heard this story, I welcome you. What you did for the Verandi survivors was seen by some as impossible. A single small vessel, driving off raiders that have troubled our forces for months. Many wish to understand how and why. There's no great secret to it," Reyes said. "We heard people calling for help, and we went to help them. That's all it ever was." A murmur ran through the gathered crowd at his words, translated instantly into a dozen languages by the station's own systems. Velmarsh's expression, unreadable at first to Reyes, softened into something like quiet wonder. "That," the administrator said slowly, "is precisely what makes this story so remarkable, Captain. In a war that has lasted longer than some species here have existed as we now know them, that kind of simplicity has become rare indeed. Reyes did not yet understand how far those words, spoken quietly on a small station at the edge of Concord space, would travel. He did not know that within days, the story of the human ship that answered a stranger's call for help would reach Concord High Command, and Skarn intelligence networks, and even the shadowed edges of whatever faction commanded the ships marked with a red claw. He only knew that the crowd before him watched with something that looked very much like hope, and that Elder Thassa Velkorin stood beside him, with quiet, unshakable pride, as if she had already seen, somehow, exactly where this story was going next. The story of the Iron Dawn. Spread faster than Captain Reyes could have imagined, and in ways he had not expected. Within 2 weeks of docking at Verena Reach, the tale had traveled through Concord news networks, retold and reshaped a dozen times, growing a little more dramatic with each telling. Some versions claimed the human ship had destroyed an entire raider fleet single-handed. Others claimed the humans had known about the attack in advance and rushed in as part of some grand strategy. The truth, simple and plain as it was, seemed almost too ordinary for a galaxy hungry for good news after years of grinding war. But the Concord Military Command took the story seriously, stripped of its exaggerations, and what they found in the plain facts troubled and impressed them in equal measure. Admiral Ket Soren Val, commander of the Concord's Eastern Defense Fleet, called for a full report within days. She was an older Ashai, feathered and sharp-eyed, known across the fleet for demanding facts over rumor. When her intelligence officers brought her the verified account, confirmed by Verandi survivors, by sensor logs recovered from the drifting wreck, and by the Iron Dawn zone recordings, which Reyes had willingly shared, she read through it twice before speaking. A single scout-class human vessel, she said slowly, engaged and defeated 4 raider ships, of a class our own analysts cannot yet identify, using tactics that should not have worked against superior numbers and firepower. That is correct, Admiral, said her intelligence chief, a nervous young Doric named Fesh Orin. Human ship design is markedly different from Concord's standard. Smaller, less heavily armored, but faster and more maneuverable than our models predicted. The human pilot's evasive patterns confused the raiders' targeting systems entirely. And the raiders themselves, Val said. The red claw marking. Have we identified them? No, Admiral. This is the 4th confirmed sighting of this faction in the past year, each attack more aggressive than the last. They do not match Skarn Dominion configurations, nor any known Concord-aligned or independent group in our records. We believe they may be a new player entirely, possibly operating from unclaimed space beyond either empire's current borders. Val sat back, considering this for a long moment. War against the Skarn Dominion had ground on for over 60 years, an old familiar shape of conflict that both sides understood, however painful. A third force, hidden and growing bolder, attacking both sides indiscriminately, was a new and unwelcome complication. And the humans, she said finally. What do our analysts make of them, now that we have real data instead of rumor? Fesh Orin hesitated before answering. Unpredictable, Admiral. That has always been the assessment since first contact 9 years ago. But this incident suggests something more specific. Human military doctrine appears to value individual initiative and rapid decision-making over rigid hierarchy. Their captain made the choice to engage without authorization from his own command structure, based solely on the distress signal itself. Several analysts believe this reflects a broader pattern in human culture, a willingness to act decisively on principle, even at significant personal and material risk. In other words, Val said, they do not calculate the odds before deciding whether someone deserves saving. That appears to be an accurate summary, Admiral, yes. Val was quiet again, staring at the star chart on her desk, at the wide, largely unexplored region of space where human territory sat at the edge of the known galaxy. Send an invitation to the human government, she said at last. Formal. At the highest level we can arrange quickly. I want to meet this Captain Reyes, and I want to understand what kind of ally, or what kind of variable, humanity might represent in this war. Back on the Iron Dawn. Still docked at Verena Reach for repairs, Reyes received word of the invitation, with a mixture of pride and unease. They want me to go to a full Concord military summit, he told Petrova, reading the formal message twice, to make sure he understood it correctly. Admiral Val herself, This isn't just a thank you, Anna. This is something bigger. You knew it might come to this, Petrova said. The moment that story started spreading, it stopped being just about us. It became about all of humanity, whether we wanted it to or not. Reyes ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of it settle on his shoulders. I'm a scout ship captain. I'm not a diplomat. I don't know the first thing about representing an entire species at a military summit. No, Petrova agreed, but you're the one who made the call to save the Varandi, and you're the one they trust because of it. Sometimes that matters more than training for diplomacy ever could. Elder Thassa Vel Korin, who had chosen to remain aboard the Iron Dawn, rather than return immediately to her people, offered her own thoughts when Reyes sought her counsel that evening. You are afraid of saying the wrong thing, she observed, watching him pace the small conference room where they had first properly spoken. I understand this fear. But Captain, consider this. The reason your story has spread as it has is not because of clever words or careful diplomacy. It is because of what you did and why you did it. Speak with the same plainness at this summit that you have shown since the night you answered our call, and I believe you will find it serves you better than any careful speech ever could. And if they ask things I don't know how to answer, questions about human military strength, about our intentions, about things far above my authority to promise, then say so plainly, Thassa said. A being who admits the limits of their own knowledge is trusted far more than one who pretends to know everything. I have sat through many Concord councils in my long life, Captain. Bluster is common, honesty is rare, and rare things are valued. Reyes considered this, and found some comfort in it, though the unease did not fully leave him. Word reached Earth's own government within days, relayed through the human embassy recently established on a neutral Concord world, and the response, when it came, surprised Reyes almost as much as the invitation itself had. Fleet Command, rather than reprimanding him for acting without authorization as he had half expected, sent formal commendation, along with orders to attend the Concord Summit as an official, if informal, representative of human interests. A senior diplomat, Ambassador Julia Chen, was dispatched to join him, along with a small support staff, but the formal request from Admiral Vall had specifically named Captain Reyes as the figure the Concord wished to hear from directly. They want to hear it from you, Ambassador Chen told him when she arrived at Verena Reach a week later, a composed, sharp-minded woman who had spent the last 9 years navigating the delicate business of human-Concord relations. Not from me, not from Fleet Command, from the man who made the decision. That tells you something important about how this war has worn down the people fighting it. They're hungry for something real, Captain, and your actions gave them that. I still don't know what I'm supposed to say to an admiral commanding an entire fleet, Reyes admitted. Ambassador Chen smiled slightly, the first real warmth Reyes had seen from her since her arrival. Say what you told the Varandi elder when she asked why you came. Because they asked, and because nobody should have to die alone out here without someone trying to help. That's not a diplomatic answer, Captain. It's a true one. Sometimes those are the same thing, and this may be one of those times. The Concord Summit was held aboard a massive command vessel called the Ember Vigil. Easily 50 times the size of the Iron Dawn. Orbiting a neutral world deep within contested space, where both Concord and, occasionally, Skarn diplomats had historically met under careful truce agreements. Reyes had never seen anything like it. Vast halls built to accommodate a dozen different body shapes and needs, corridors humming with the quiet energy of thousands of crew members from 100 different worlds. Admiral Ket Sorenval met him personally in a private chamber before the larger summit began, her sharp, shy eyes studying him with open curiosity. You are smaller than I expected, she said, not unkindly, for someone whose actions have caused such a stir among my officers. I get that a lot, Reyes admitted, and something in Val's feathered expression suggested amusement. Tell me plainly, Captain Reyes, and do not waste my time with careful diplomatic phrases meant to please everyone and mean nothing. Why did you risk your ship, your crew, everything, for a species you had never met, in a war that is not your own? Reyes thought of Thassa's advice, and of Ambassador Chen's words, and found the answer came easily, because it had never really needed careful phrasing in the first place. Because they asked for help, Admiral, and my crew and I were the only ones close enough to give it. I didn't calculate whether it was worth the risk. I didn't think about what humanity might gain from it. I just thought about the fact that somewhere out there, people were dying, and we could maybe stop that from happening. That's the whole reason. There isn't a more complicated one hiding underneath it. Vol studied him for a long moment, her sharp eyes unreadable. Then she nodded slowly, as if confirming something she had already suspected. That is precisely what I hope to hear, Captain, and precisely what worries some of my colleagues, she said. A species that acts on principle rather than calculation is difficult to predict, and difficult things are often distrusted in wartime. But I have fought this war against the Skarn Dominion for 43 years, Captain Reyes. I have watched calculation and caution cost us worlds, cost us lives, cost us the very alliances that should have held strong. Perhaps what this war needs is something that acts less like a careful strategist, and more like the kind of soldier who runs toward a scream in the dark, without stopping to count the cost first. She rose from her seat, moving toward the wide viewport that looked out over the stars beyond the Ember Vigil. There is something else you should know, Captain, before you enter that summit hall, she said. The raiders who attacked the Varandi vessel were not an isolated incident. We have confirmed 6 similar attacks in the past year alone, each one testing deeper into contested space, each one more coordinated than the last. We believe they are searching for something, or preparing for something, though we do not yet know what. Some of my officers fear they may be a new faction entirely, one with resources and ambitions we have not yet fully understood. And you think humanity might be able to help against them, Reyes said slowly. I think, Vol said, turning back to face him, that after 63 years of a war that has cost this galaxy more than most young species can imagine, a small ship that answers distress calls without hesitation, without calculation, without demanding payment first, may be exactly the kind of ally this war has been missing. Whether the wider Concord Council agrees with me remains to be seen, but I intend to argue for it, Captain Reyes, and I suspect your presence in that hall today will do more to convince them than any speech I could give on your behalf. She gestured toward the door leading to the main summit hall, where the murmur of hundreds of gathered representatives could already be heard beyond the thick walls. Are you ready? She asked. Reyes thought of the Iron Dawn, of Petrova and Priya and Cole and the whole crew who had trusted his judgment in the dark 6 weeks earlier, without fully understanding where it might lead. He thought of Thassa Velkorin and her granddaughter S, safe now because a young lieutenant on night watch had not dismissed a strange signal as simple static. As ready as I'll ever be, he said, and stepped through the doors into the summit hall, where the next chapter of humanity's place among the stars was about to begin. The summit hall aboard the Ember Vigil was larger than any room Reyes had ever stood in, its curved walls lined with viewports showing the slow turn of stars outside, and its floor filled with representatives from every major Concord species, along with smaller delegations from minor worlds like the Varandi. When Reyes entered beside Admiral Vol, the murmuring conversation across the hall did not stop entirely, but it noticeably quieted. Hundreds of eyes, some large and dark, some narrow and sharp, some compound and strange, turning toward the small human figure walking across the wide floor. Ambassador Chen fell into step beside him, her expression calm and professional, though Reyes caught the faint tension in her shoulders that told him even she found this moment weighty. They took their places at a raised section near the front of the hall, and Admiral Vol moved to the central podium, her sharp, shy voice carrying easily across the space, even without amplification. Representatives of the Concord, she began. 6 weeks ago, a human scout vessel called the Iron Dawn answered a distress call from a Varandi transport under attack by unidentified raider forces in contested space. The human captain acted without authorization from his own command structure, engaged a numerically superior force, and successfully rescued 117 survivors, at significant risk to his own ship and crew. She paused, letting the words settle across the hall. I have called this summit not simply to honor that action, though it deserves honoring, but because it raises a question this council has debated for years without resolution. Humanity remains outside the formal Concord Alliance, a young species we have watched with curiosity, sometimes suspicion, and occasionally dismissal. I believe the actions of Captain Reyes and his crew demand we reconsider that position seriously, and soon. A representative from the Doruk delegation, an older being with graying fur and formal war medals across his chest, rose to speak. Admiral Val, I do not dispute the bravery shown by this human captain, but bravery alone does not make an ally. What do we truly know of human capability, human resources, human willingness to commit to a war that has already cost this galaxy so much? One heroic action against 4 raider vessels tells us little about what humanity could offer against the full might of the Skarn Dominion. A fair question, Val acknowledged. Which is why I have asked Captain Reyes to speak directly, rather than relying only on reports and second-hand accounts. All eyes turned to Reyes. He rose slowly, feeling the weight of every gaze in that vast hall, and reminded himself of Thassa's words. Speak plainly. Speak true. I won't pretend to speak for all of humanity, he began, his voice steady, despite the nervousness in his chest. I'm a scout ship captain, not a politician, and I don't have the authority to promise you fleets or resources, or anything beyond what my own small crew can offer. What I can tell you is this: when my ship picked up that distress call, we didn't know who was sending it, or what we might find, or whether helping would cost us everything. We went anyway, because that's what we believe a person should do when someone else is in danger, and you have the power to help. If that's the kind of ally you're looking for, then I think humanity has something real to offer this war. If you're looking for guaranteed strength in numbers, or unlimited resources, I can't promise you that. We're a young species, and we're still finding our place among the stars. A younger delegate, and a shy like Admiral Val, called out from across the hall. And if aiding the Concord costs your species dearly, Captain, if this war demands more of humanity than a single scout ship's brave action, will your people still stand with us when the cost grows heavier? Reyes considered the question carefully before answering. I can't promise you what my government will decide in the years ahead, because that's not my decision to make alone. But I can tell you what I believe, for whatever that's worth. My crew and I didn't stop to calculate the cost before deciding to help the Verandi. We just knew it was right, and we acted. If that reflects something true about humanity as a whole, and I believe it does, then I think you'll find us willing to bear real costs for causes we believe in, the same way any of your own species have borne heavy costs in this long war. The hall fell into a low murmur of discussion, translated through a dozen different systems into a dozen different languages, delegates leaning toward one another to speak in hushed, urgent tones. Reyes sat back down, uncertain whether he had said the right thing, or whether any words could have satisfied a council so divided by decades of war weariness and caution. Elder Thassa Velkorin, who had been granted a seat among the minor delegations, rose next, her voice carrying clearly, despite her people's modest standing, among the Concord's larger powers. I ask permission to speak, Admiral, she said, and at Val's nod, continued. I was aboard the vessel that Captain Reyes and his crew saved. I watched my people die around me in the dark, calling for help I did not believe would ever come. When the human ship arrived, I did not know what to expect. I feared, honestly, that they might simply observe and report, as so many larger powers have done, when smaller peoples like mine have called for aid in the past. She paused, and the hall grew quiet, listening. Instead, they fought. They took damage to their own ship that nearly cost them everything, to save people they had never met, who could offer them nothing in return but gratitude. I do not know what humanity's full strength is, or what resources they could commit to this war. But I know what I saw, and I know that in 63 years of this terrible conflict, I have rarely seen such willingness to risk everything for strangers, with nothing to offer in exchange. If this council seeks calculation and certainty before it will consider an ally, then perhaps it is looking for the wrong thing. Sometimes what a tired, desperate war needs most is simply someone willing to answer the call. Her words settled over the hall with more weight than Reyes's own had carried. Perhaps because they came from someone who had lived through both the darkness and the rescue, someone the assembled delegates recognized as having nothing to gain from flattering a species she barely knew. Admiral Val let the silence stretch a moment longer before speaking again. I do not ask this council to commit to a full alliance today. That is a decision requiring far more deliberation than a single summit can provide. But I do ask that we formally open diplomatic and military channels with humanity, that we share intelligence regarding this new raider threat, and that we consider, seriously and without the dismissiveness some among us have shown in the past, what role humanity might play in the difficult years ahead. The vote that followed was not unanimous. Several delegations, cautious after decades of war, abstained or voted against deeper engagement, worried about the unknown risks of tying Concord fortunes too closely to an unproven young species. But the majority carried, and by the time the summit concluded, formal channels had been opened between human authorities and the Concord Military Command, along with an agreement to share intelligence on the mysterious Red Claw raiders that had, until now, remained largely unknown to human forces entirely. The consequences of that summit rippled outward faster than anyone aboard the Iron Dawn had expected. Within a month, Concord intelligence shared with Human Command revealed the true scope of the raider threat. Not isolated attacks, but a growing pattern of coordinated strikes across contested space, striking Concord, and, increasingly, Skarn Dominion targets alike. Analysts on both sides had begun to suspect the raiders were testing defenses, probing for weaknesses, perhaps in preparation for something larger. Then, 6 weeks after the summit, the raiders struck again. This time against a Skarn Dominion outpost, deep in territory the Empire had long considered secure. The attack was devastating, and unlike anything the Skarn had faced before, using tactics and weapons that matched almost exactly what the raiders had used against the Varandi months earlier. For the first time in over 60 years of war, Concord and Skarn intelligence networks began, cautiously, and through carefully guarded back channels, sharing information about a threat neither side fully understood. Reyes learned of these developments through updates from Ambassador Chen and Admiral Vol, both of whom had, since the summit, kept him informed as a courtesy, given his unusual role in bringing the situation to wider attention. "They're calling them the Ashkar now," Chen told him during one such briefing, delivered via secure channel, while the Iron Dawn, repaired and back in service, patrolled the border regions near human space. It's the closest translation Concord linguists could manage for the symbol on their ships. Early intelligence suggests they may be a splinter faction that broke away from a smaller empire destroyed decades ago during the earliest years of the Concord-Skarn War, one that has spent all this time rebuilding in secret, waiting for the right moment to strike. "Strike at what exactly?" Reyes asked. "That's what nobody fully understands yet," Chen admitted. "But the pattern of their attacks suggests they're not interested in conquest, in the traditional sense. They're testing, gathering resources, perhaps preparing for a much larger operation. Both Concord and Skarn analysts fear they may be planning something big enough to exploit the exhaustion of a war that's already lasted over 60 years. Reyes felt a familiar unease settle in his chest, the same unease he had felt 6 weeks earlier when the Iron Dawn first dropped out of fast travel to find the Varandi ship burning in the dark. And where does that leave humanity in all of this? "Right in the middle, whether we like it or not," Chen said. "The story of what you did for the Varandi opened doors that were closed before, Captain. Concord Command sees humanity as a potential ally now, not just a curiosity at the edge of known space. But that also means human territory is no longer quite as invisible to threats like the Ashkar as it once was. If they're testing both empires, probing for weaknesses, it's only a matter of time before they turn their attention toward us as well." That warning proved prophetic sooner than anyone aboard the Iron Dawn expected. 3 weeks later, a routine patrol along the outer edge of human territory picked up faint sensor readings, a ship of unfamiliar design, marked, when finally glimpsed clearly through long-range imaging, with a jagged red claw against a dark hull. The Ashkar had found humanity. Reyes stood on the bridge of the Iron Dawn, staring at the grainy image on the display, and felt the weight of everything that had happened since that first distress call settle fully upon him for the first time. What had begun as a single decision to answer a stranger's call for help had, in a matter of months, drawn humanity into the edges of a war that had raged across the galaxy for over 6 decades. "Orders, Captain?" Petrova asked quietly, watching him with steady, patient eyes. Reyes thought of Thassa's words, of Admiral Vol's, of everything that had changed since the night Lieutenant Mira Voss first caught a strange signal in the dark. He thought of the Varandi children who had once huddled frightened in his ship's mess hall, now safely resettled, and of the raiders who had nearly killed them, now testing the borders of his own people's territory. "Send word to Fleet Command," he said finally. "And send word to Admiral Val. It's time humanity found out exactly what we're dealing with, before the Ashkar decide to test us the same way they tested the Verandi." He looked out at the stars beyond the viewport, dark and vast, and suddenly far less distant than they had once seemed. "And get Priya to run full diagnostics on every weapon this ship has," he added quietly. "Something tells me we're going to need them again soon." The Ashkar ship that had been spotted along the edge of human territory vanished before the Iron Dawn could intercept it, slipping away into fast travel long before human forces arrived. But the sighting sent a clear message to both human command and Concord leadership alike. The raiders who had attacked the Verandi, and later the Skarn Dominion, were now watching humanity as well. In the weeks that followed, human patrols along the border grew more frequent, more cautious. Fleet Command, working closely now with both Concord military advisors and the small intelligence-sharing network established after the summit aboard the Ember Vigil, began preparing defenses that would have seemed impossible only a year earlier, when humanity had still been treated as a curiosity at the edge of galactic affairs, rather than a species worth taking seriously. Admiral Val herself traveled to human space for the first time, meeting personally with Earth's own Defense Council, along with Captain Reyes and Ambassador Chen, to discuss what intelligence suggested was coming. "We believe the Ashkar are preparing a major operation," Val told the gathered human officials, her sharp as shy voice carrying the same weight it had carried in the Concord Summit Hall months earlier. "Their recent attacks, though devastating, have all followed a pattern of testing defenses, gathering resources, and withdrawing, before either Concord or Skarn forces could mount a full counterattack. We believe they have been preparing for something larger than isolated raids. Recent intelligence suggests a possible target, a supply corridor that runs directly between contested Concord and Skarn space. A corridor that, if severed, would devastate both empires' ability to continue this war at all. And you believe they'll strike there soon," Reyes said. "Within weeks, our analysts estimate," Val confirmed. "If they succeed, the resulting chaos could weaken both the Concord and the Skarn Dominion so severely that the Ashkar could expand unchecked into the resulting power vacuum. It is, in effect, a strike aimed not at winning territory directly, but at breaking the back of an entire 60-year war and remaking the galaxy in the aftermath." The Human Defense Council debated for hours after Val's briefing, weighing the risks of involvement against the dangers of remaining isolated, while a threat capable of reshaping galactic power grew unchecked at their doorstep. In the end, the decision came down, as such decisions often did, to a simple question posed quietly by Ambassador Chen near the close of the meeting. "If we do nothing," she said, "and the Ashkar succeed in breaking both the Concord and the Skarn, what do we imagine happens next? Do we believe they'll simply leave humanity alone, content with what they've already won? Or do we believe, as history has shown again and again, that unchecked power eventually turns its attention toward whoever remains?" Nobody in that room had a good answer to counter her question, and by the end of the day, humanity had committed, for the first time since first contact 9 years earlier, real military support to a fight beyond its own borders. The battle for the supply corridor, when it came, was unlike anything the Iron Dawn or its crew had faced before. The Ashkar arrived with a fleet far larger than any of their previous raids had suggested. Nearly 40 warships, sleek and dark, marked with the same jagged red claw that had haunted human and Concord intelligence reports for months. Waiting for them, gathered hastily but with careful coordination born of newly shared intelligence, stood a combined defense force, unlike anything the galaxy had seen in 63 years of war. Concord warships, alongside a smaller contingent of Skarn Dominion vessels, an uneasy alliance, forged not from friendship, but from the shared understanding that a threat like the Ashkar endangered them both equally. And among that gathered fleet, smaller than most of the great Concord battleships and Skarn dreadnoughts surrounding it, flew the Iron Dawn. Its hull still bearing faint scars from the battle that had started all of this months earlier. "Feels strange, doesn't it?" Petrova said quietly, standing beside Reyes on the bridge, as the massive combined fleet arrayed itself against the incoming Ashkar force. Skarn and Concord ships, side by side. A year ago, that would have been unthinkable. A year ago, humanity fighting alongside either of them would have been just as unthinkable, Reyes said. Sometimes it takes something big enough to break old patterns before anyone's willing to try something new. The battle began with the Ashkar fleet advancing in tight, disciplined formation, their tactics sharp and coordinated in a way that suggested long preparation for exactly this kind of confrontation. The combined Concord-Skarn fleet met them with equal discipline, though the strain of an alliance built in weeks rather than years showed in small moments of hesitation, of unfamiliar coordination between forces that had spent decades as enemies rather than allies. It was in one such moment, when a Skarn battle group found itself exposed and vulnerable after a Concord support fleet hesitated to reinforce a position still unfamiliar and distrusted, that the Iron Dawn once again found itself making the same kind of choice that had started this entire chain of events months earlier. "Captain," Priya called from her station, "Skarn cruiser group is taking heavy fire, exposed on the eastern flank. Concord support isn't moving to reinforce. Might be a communication delay, might be old distrust. I can't tell which." Reyes looked at the tactical display, at the exposed Skarn ships taking damage they could not sustain much longer, at the hesitation rippling through a fleet still learning to trust its newest allies. "We're not big enough to save them alone," Petrova said quietly, reading his intention before he spoke it. "No," Reyes agreed, "but maybe we don't need to save them alone. Maybe we just need to remind everyone else why we're all out here fighting together in the first place." "Cole, get us to that flank, best speed. Priya, target the ships pressing the Skarn cruisers hardest. Open a channel to the Concord support fleet. Wide broadcast if you can manage it." When the channel opened, Reyes did not waste time on careful diplomatic phrasing. "This is Captain Reyes of the Iron Dawn. The Skarn cruiser group is about to be destroyed if nobody moves to help them. I don't care what old history is making anyone hesitate right now. We're moving to reinforce. Anyone willing to follow, now would be the time." For a tense moment, nothing happened. The Concord support fleet still holding position, old distrust and hesitation weighing against the urgency of the moment. Then, almost as if the memory of a small human scout ship answering a stranger's desperate call for help months earlier had finally broken through decades of hardened caution, the Concord support fleet began to move, falling into formation alongside the Iron Dawn. As it raced toward the exposed Skarn flank, the reinforcement arrived just in time, breaking the Ashkar assault on the Skarn cruiser group and turning what had been a dangerous weak point into a hard-fought stalemate. The battle raged on for hours after that, brutal and costly on all sides, but the combined fleet held its ground, refusing to let the Ashkar break through toward the vital supply corridor they had come to destroy. In the end, it was not overwhelming firepower or clever strategy alone that turned the tide, but the slow, hard-won trust built between three very different peoples over the course of that single, desperate battle. Concord ships, covering Skarn flanks they would once have abandoned without a second thought. Skarn commanders, relaying tactical information to Concord allies they had fought for 6 decades, and a small human ship weaving between them all, plugging gaps in the line wherever hesitation threatened to open them. When the Ashkar fleet finally broke and retreated, having lost more than half its ships in the fighting, a strange, exhausted quiet settled over what remained of the combined defense force. Reports flooded in from across the fleet, losses on all sides, ships damaged beyond easy repair, crews shaken by the intensity of the fighting. But the supply corridor held, and with it, the fragile balance of a war that had ground on for 63 years, without any real hope of change. In the months that followed the battle at the supply corridor, the galaxy began, slowly and carefully, to shift. The uneasy alliance forged in that single desperate fight did not immediately end the long war between the Concord and the Skarn Dominion, old grievances and territorial disputes too deep to vanish overnight. But it opened, for the first time in over 6 decades, real dialogue between two empires that had almost forgotten how to speak to one another as anything other than enemies. Quiet negotiations began, slow and difficult, but real, focused first on the shared threat the Ashkar still represented, and gradually expanding into broader questions about what an actual end to the wider war might someday look like. Humanity, meanwhile, found itself in a position nobody could have predicted a year earlier. No longer a curiosity at the edge of galactic affairs, but a recognized player whose actions had, time and again, tipped the balance at crucial moments. Formal alliance talks began between human authorities and the Concord Council within months, and even the Skarn Dominion, cautious and proud as they were, opened careful diplomatic channels with the small species whose scout ship had reinforced their exposed cruisers when older allies hesitated. Captain Reyes returned to the Goan. Iron Dawn. His home port for a brief leave, the first real rest his crew had enjoyed since that first distress call months earlier. Standing on the observation deck of the station, looking out at the stars that had once seemed so distant and unknowable, he found Elder Thassa Velkorin waiting for him, having traveled a long distance simply to see him one more time, before returning to her people's resettled colony. "You did not have to come all this way," Reyes said, though he was glad she had. "I wish to see, with my own eyes, what has become of the debt I once believed I could never repay," Thassa said, her ancient voice carrying the same quiet warmth he remembered from their first meeting. "I have watched a small human scout ship, and the captain who commands it, change the shape of a war that has lasted longer than most species remember not fighting. I have watched old enemies begin, slowly, to speak with one another again, because a stranger from an unknown species once decided that a call for help deserved an answer, regardless of the cost. We didn't do it alone," Reyes said. "None of it would have mattered without everyone else willing to take the same chance. Your people, the Concord Council, even the Skarn commanders who chose to trust strangers, instead of falling back on old hatred." "That is true," Thassa agreed. "But someone had to be first, Captain Reyes. Someone had to prove that answering a stranger's call for help was possible, before anyone else could find the courage to try it themselves. That is what your ship did, on a night neither of us will ever forget. And that, I believe, is why this galaxy's long war may yet find its end, where once it seemed it never would." She looked out at the stars beside him, her granddaughter S, grown a little taller now, standing quietly at her side. "The Ashkar remain a danger," Thassa continued. "The old war between Concord and Skarn is far from truly over. There will be more battles, more losses, more difficult days ahead for all of us. But I have lived a very long life, Captain Reyes, long enough to know that galaxies do not change because of grand plans made in comfortable council halls. They change because, somewhere in the vast dark, someone hears a stranger's call for help, and decides, without calculating the cost, that the answer must be yes." Reyes thought of that first night, of Lieutenant Mira Voss catching a strange signal that almost seemed like nothing more than static, of the choice he had made in the dark, with no guarantee it was the right one. He thought of everything that single decision had set in motion, an alliance nobody could have predicted, a war beginning, slowly and painfully, to bend towards something like peace, and a small human ship that had, against all expectation, changed the shape of a galaxy far larger than anyone aboard it had ever imagined touching. "I just answered a call for help," he said quietly. "That's all it ever was." "Yes," Thassa said, smiling in the strange, warm way of her people, "and perhaps that is exactly why it changed everything." Above them, the stars turned on, indifferent and endless, carrying within them a galaxy slowly, carefully, beginning to heal, one small, brave answer to a distant scream in the dark, echoing outward across the vast and silent deep. The end.